Nothing new. Welcome back to Inevitable, a weekly wisdom series where we have been journeying through Ecclesiastes, the first chapter. I'm Pastor Cheryl. This week we will read verses 8 and 9. All words are tiring. No one is able to speak. The eye isn't satisfied with seeing, neither is the ear filled up by hearing. Whatever has happened, that's what will happen again. Whatever has occurred, that's what will occur again. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. You've probably have heard that expression before. You know, when we hear it, it's often expressed as a fatalistic view of the world, or it could even just be a very accepting statement that life is what it is and has always been in some way this way. It's an acknowledgement of the patterns and seasons of life that do not change or that are predictable in some way. Things we've experienced before, maybe in new ways, maybe new challenges, but at the root of them, at the heart of them, are things that we have encountered. There's nothing new under the sun. It's a recognition that our lives are lived in moments of triumph and moments of despair, of hills and valleys and lows, and that other people have taken similar journeys, even if the technology is different, even if the condition of the world, the geopolitical landscape has changed, that there's certain parts, aspects of our lives that aren't new. We've been through this before. Even if this is manifesting itself in different ways. There have been global pandemics before. We can name the most recent that we know of, the Spanish flu, a century ago, has been experienced by folks who are still living. Now, they may have been very young. In fact, those who are still living were very young. I think the oldest human beings right now are probably 114, 115 years old, and there aren't that many of them. And so they would have been children at the time of the last pandemic. Well, have we experienced collective health challenges? We see echoes of previous experiences in our current experiences. And the beauty of that can be that we can look towards the past, not only to be predictive of our future, but to be instructive in terms of the ways that we respond to our present or not respond. I think about the way that the HIV and AIDS dawned on the horizon. And I was, fairly young at the time, but I still remember how people were ostracized, how people were demonized for sickness and disease. That's not new. That same thing has happened with people with cancer. Same thing has happened with people. We can even know from biblical times and understanding that sickness and disease was considered to be a consequence or punishment for bad behavior or non-righteous living or unrighteous living, that it was a curse, a punishment. But we can also remember that people thought that if you had twins, multiple births were considered to be a reflection of at least a partial curse, as the one of the siblings would be considered to be born of evil and the other good. The ways that instead of understanding that is a very simple biological process that creates twins in human beings. That's just an example, a couple of examples of ways in which we can look to the past to be instructive and informative and can challenge us to respond differently in our present and in our future. I titled this series Inevitable because it comes out of very much the the tone and content of this text. But what is inevitable is inevitable. Things that cannot be changed cannot be changed. But what I hope that we learn in our discerning is that not all things are inevitable. While circumstances and challenges and things that happen at their very root may be the same as what's happened before, there's nothing new under the sun. That doesn't mean we have to respond the same way. We've learned how to create things to protect us from the sun. Early human beings probably used the shade of trees and foliage. They erected simple constructed buildings or structures in order to shield them from the sun. We have sunscreen that we can apply right onto our skin. We don't have to go into a cave or seclude ourselves, isolate ourselves from the sun during the day. There's nothing new under the sun. The sun is still functioning the way that it has, but our response is different. And that's what's not inevitable. That's what we can change. That is what we have a measure of control over. The way in which we respond in thought and action, indeed. Our attitudes and behavior are not inevitable. They're very much in our purview. They're very much the decision that we make every day is how do we respond to what is inevitable, to that thing that happens. When God says so often, there are so many instances in the Bible where God is saying, I'm doing a new thing. And that new thing often is the thing that God is doing in us, which is what I love. There may be nothing new under the sun, but you are new, you are unique, you're a human being. So humanity is not new, but you are. And your uniqueness, your chosenness, your very, very individual set of circumstances and conditions and combination of spirit and environment, nurture and nature, and all the things that have been planted in you and that have surrounded you and have shaped and formed you into who you are as a child of God, as a human being imprinted with the divine on your DNA, is that you get to respond. You get to respond to the inevitable in ways that are not inevitable. And God is doing a new thing in us and through us, even if what's around us can be predictable. There's nothing new under the sun. We say that we're living in unprecedented times, and the particular conditions and circumstances that conspire and come together, excuse me, may be brand new. But we can look back to history and learn lessons from our past. We can go back and be informed. And we can, in this moment and in the moments to come, choose the path, choose the direction that we will take. We may be tired. We may not have words. We may not want to look or hear at what's going on around us. We may think that the things around us that keep happening will keep happening and there's nothing we can do about it, but there is. And one of the lessons of the writers of Ecclesiastes gives us is that it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to express these feelings. It's okay to be frustrated when we continue to encounter the same thing over and over and over again. But even the writer of Ecclesiastes doesn't have the final say. because it's the God, our source, who continues to do a new thing, whose streams continue to flow inexhaustibly with living water. Is with us, is steadfast, remains. And on that we can rest, and on that we can be assured, and on that we can believe that God is also inevitable. And isn't that good news? Even if everything else seems to be topsy-turvy, our God is faithful and abiding, and there's also nothing new about that. Thank you for joining me for another weekly wisdom. I hope you'll join me again next week for the final edition of this series of inevitable weekly wisdom. I hope you will subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more of this type of content, like this video. If you also just want to give some affirmation, comment below and let me know your thoughts. Really like to hear from you and interact with you in that way. Until next time, love God, love your neighbor, love yourself on the journey. Be blessed.